At a Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiaga. Thank you very much for choosing to continue your day with us here at a Metropole Television. This is your official economic review. Let me introduce the panel that is joining us this morning for the biggest headlines that you're waking up to this morning. We're joined by EFFIE OTIENO, who's a real estate research coordinator. EFFIE, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Fantastic. Happy to have you around. We are also joined by Anthony NJIRU, who's a real estate research analyst. Anthony, good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Happy to have you around, Anthony, and welcome to Metropole Television. We are also joined by George MUNGA, who's a managing partner at AMG Kenya. George, good morning, sir.
Morning, Elijah. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Now, let's begin then. The government's push to cap rent increases on commercial and residential premises has received a backing from a parliamentary committee in a law that is seeking to protect tenants from arbitrary rental changes. Now, the Landlord and Tenants Bill of 2021 was approved by the National Assembly Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing, awaiting debate and passage by the main house. Now, the bill proposes to have rent increases capped at the inflation rate of the preceding year, with landlords only allowed to make changes to compensate for additional services or for upgrading the premises. This will mean that building owners will be allowed to increase rent once a year for residential houses and once in 2 years, marking the first attempt by the state to regulate rent. Now, rent prices in Nairobi have jumped almost threefold from 2007, with a new proposed law asking for the removal of the restriction for a tribunal to hear disputes between landlords and tenants for rent that does not exceed 2,500 shillings in a bid to protect more tenants. Landlords and tenants who fail to comply with the rulings of the tribunal face a fine of 200,000 shillings or 1 year in jail or both. Let's begin like this. I'm just going to sample your views on this. And I'm going to start with you, Anthony. Is this good news or bad news?
Okay, that's a good question. And I think it depends with where you're looking at it.
Yes.
From a tenant point of view, to get beyond a certain point by the next year.
Yes.
That is assuming that the law is passed. But if you're looking at it from a developer's or an owner's point of view, you may see that it's going to have some effect on the returns that they get. And to be particular, that is the rental yield,
yes,
which is a function of the rent that the tenants pay. So, the idea is developers may not be happy, given that they do not have the power to increase the rents as they did before. And you also realize that this has been brought to 1 year, so you cannot revise the rents for a period of 12 months for residential properties, and for commercial properties you cannot revise rent for a period of 2 years. So given the current state right now, I would say that most developers and landowners are not happy. But as for tenants, it's a good thing, given that they can do their budgets, they know their rent is not going to be beyond a certain point, and we have experienced hikes in rents, especially in the areas in the Nairobi metropolitan, because of the high demand and the working class from town, let me say town. And so the high demand will, of course, lead to the owners and the developers increasing rents as demand piles up. So it's to just cut it short, it's good news for tenants, it's probably bad news for developers and owners.
Pretty much. Anthony, I'll be coming back to you so we can actually get to expound more on that. EFFIE, let me also get your sentiments as we open this discussion. Is it good news or bad news, the entirety of this bill that has been backed by the National House?
Thank you. Just as my colleague has said, this is a two-way thing. For tenants, I'm sure this is a news. This is something they'll receive positively, but developers are I would say their hands are now tied. You don't have now, they don't have now the freedom to make the decisions from their investments. You are tied on how much you'll increase your rent. So I'm sure tenants are happy about this news, but on the other side, developers, I think it's not something they will take in positively.
Pretty much. I'll be coming back to you on that as well. George, your sentiment on this. Generally, is it good news or bad news?
Simba, I've never been an advocate for price controls
Yes.
in my entire practice, and
Yes.
I would not want to be on record supporting price controls, especially in the real estate subsector. You've seen what has happened in the petroleum or the energy subsector, where we instituted price controls over the last few years, and instead of protecting the consumer, it has come to harm the consumer at the end of the day. The way our governments operate, Elijah, if you are to introduce such price controls, the benefit will not go to the intended consumer base, but it will go to a few cartels in the cycle, so that they are the ones who benefit at the expense of the consumers. As it is, Elijah, I would not support anything to do with price controls, not only in the real estate subsector, but in the entire economy as it is. Remember, we had a debate the other day about removing price controls in the energy subsector. And if you look at what informed price controls in the petroleum or the energy subsector, was that private practitioners were trying to hike prices day in, day out. But if you look at what has happened from the time we instituted these price controls today, the prices of petroleum products have kept on going higher and higher year in, year out. So, Elijah, in a nutshell, my point is, let market forces determine the prices that landlords charge and that tenants pay for the spaces that they occupy.
Pretty much. All right, Anthony, let's then talk about it, because you hear exactly what George is saying, price controls. If you're not going to determine how much I am going to ask for my property, why would you want to determine how much or by how much I am going to raise it? Is it not still willing buyer, willing seller, if indeed I am going to set the price at which I'm selling it per month? Anthony, can you confirm you can get us there?
Yeah, I'm with you. So just as George has said, the whole idea on capping prices,
yes,
it was reintroduced in 2011, and in 2017 we saw the government cap the price of a 2 kg pack of maize flour at 90 shillings. I hope you remember that.
Yes, I remember.
So it's the whole idea is the government looks to the control whatever they deem as basic commodities, and there's that law that was reintroduced in 2011. So what basically happens is the National Treasury is given the power to gazette anything that they will deem as basic and as touching to the common mwananchi. But now the problem comes on the liberality of markets.
Yes.
Because ideally, like for example, talking about the rent cap, if you're a developer, there are three things you will look at. You will look at the demand, you look at maybe amenities and maybe infrastructure. So if someone is tampering with how you do your demand model, then you are in some sort of trouble when it comes to evaluating your returns and when it comes to evaluating even the area that you can invest in, which may bring maybe a delocalization of investments. You may find that now real estate developers are moving to other kinds of securities and maybe shying away from real estate because you do not know what the government is going to do next, and you also don't know when it's going to be done. So as George has said, it's good to let the market forces determine some of these things. But on the other hand, you have the government trying to do the basic or to extend an olive branch for the common mwananchi. So
Yes.
it's a thin line, but at the end of the day, you remember last year, and I think this is where this debate began, when the president said that he cannot really control rents and waivers. He cannot force owners to do that. So I think that was the beginning point. And from there, all this idea has been in the kitchen cabinet, and now we are seeing it as a legislation. Remember, this bill is government backed. It came in through the leader of majority. So it's a thin line, but at the end of the day, we are supposed to see the market, supply and demand play out.
EFFIE, let me also get you in that conversation, because the question is going to be, if you cannot determine how much I'm going to charge for my property from the get-go, why would you determine by how much I'm supposed to increase that rent the next time I sell it to the next interested buyer? The next interested buyer? Is that where the complexity comes in? Because then I have the leeway to set my price so high that even if I don't increase it, it is insignificant.
We'll comment on that. Historically, or how the real estate sector works is,
Yes.
I determine my prices based on the available amenities I have in my property, or the market demands. These are the forces. Supply, where the supply is low,
Yes.
you are likely to make your properties higher compared to where the supply is high. So I'm sure now that is the developers, the landlords are now tied. It's very hard for them to make an open decision based on forces in the market. They're now on the mercy of the new legislation that the government has enforced.
Yes,
So
EFFIE,
it's going to become a challenge.
EFFIE, if you may allow me, because I really want to understand, you're saying that they are tied, but are they, EFFIE, because this legislation is just on the increase of that rent? EFFIE, they have all those factors when they're setting the prices. It's just the increase that's going to be affected, EFFIE.
Yes, remember, even if you look at research, you will say an area prices are increasing to a certain percentage. That's what we call yields and capital appreciation.
Yes.
But now you are limited to whatever the government is setting, not the demands, the forces in the market. You might realize an area prices are increasing at a very high rate, but I had set my price initially at the rate at which I found it at the current market price. But in the next, maybe let's say 2 or 3 years, I'll be limited to how much I can increase the prices. So meaning I'm just doing it based on whatever regulations are there, but not based on the forces of demand or supply.
Pretty much. So now, George, then, what stops me from looking at all those factors and accounting for a 5-year plan where indeed this inflation adjustment that the government wants me to stick to is going to be null and void?
Elijah, if you look at our economic model right from independence,
yes,
we adopted the capitalist economic model,
yes,
meaning that we decided to allow the forces of demand and supply to determine how goods are priced in this economy. During the Kanu era, Elijah, maybe you're still very young by that time, the government then tried to do a lot of price controls. And in fact, that is the time that we had FX, that is foreign currency controls. We had basic goods control. We had fuel and prices control. And if you can remember, the economy was doing very, very badly. And the persons who are benefiting most in that kind of a model were the people at the very top. And the rest of the populace were suffering. And then when the government changed, we went back to the liberalist economic model, where we allowed the market forces to determine the price of the market for almost everything. And you saw the kind of economic boom that we had. That is the period where we had quite a lot of new companies coming into the space. Remember, that's the time that Equity Bank blossomed. That is the time when we had the likes of Nakuma, the likes of Tuskys coming into space and occupying that space very strongly. Then when you came to this government, Elijah, we have tried to control interest rates. Remember what we did with interest rates in 2018, 2020, and that flopped on its head, Elijah, if you can remember.
Yes.
Then we have tried to control the prices of fuel up to date, and you've seen what we've had in that space, Elijah. We tried to control the price of as Anthony put it earlier. What happened? Elijah, from history, price controls don't work in a market like ours. It might work in other jurisdictions, especially in more communistic economies. But for a market like ours, price controls don't work, because what happens is when you bring in price control, then you stifle what we call entrepreneurship in the market. And when you do that, you benefit the few bureaucrats at the top at the expense of the rest of the population. So as it is when you come now to the real estate subsector, I think you saw the boom in the real estate subsector over the last, I think, 10 years. And then there's a lull. That is the name. That there's a boom, and then there's a trough at some point, and then there's a boom again. So we want to really advise Parliament and whoever is moving this bill to tread carefully, so that we don't stifle entrepreneurship, we don't stifle innovation in that space. Otherwise, if you did that, then we'll benefit very few people in the ministry at the expense of the rest of the economy, Elijah.
Pretty much. All right, Anthony, as we come to the end of this conversation, so what is the likely ripple effect we are bound to see in the economy, especially in the real estate sector, should this be adopted the way it is? Because it looks as if it's going to get this backing, Anthony.
So, as you have mentioned, the bill is highly likely to pass, given that, one, it's government-backed.
Yes.
Number two, it's a bill that touches on the common mwananchi. So you would expect that as an MP, you don't want to see your electorate seeing you opposing such a bill. And the kind of administration that we have right now, it's very biased towards government kinds of legislation. We don't have that much of an opposition, so it's highly likely that the bill is going to pass. Moving on to the effect, like I had mentioned, number one, we are going to witness a delocalization of real estate investments in the Nairobi metropolitan area.
Yes.
Because these are the areas with high demand. So if you're not getting any kind of high return in an area that has high demand, you can as well invest in most of those satellite towns, most of those. So you can expect that there will be a delocalization in terms of real estate investment. Number two, you can expect some kind of stagnation in real estate investments, because people or investors run to real estate because it has been performing the best, as opposed to maybe bonds or market averages for equities. So that is where developers have been, or investors have been capitalizing. So if it's no longer an option that gives you the best, then why not move to something else? So we are going to see those two things: delocalization of real estate investment, especially in the Nairobi metropolitan area, and we're also going to witness what I've just mentioned as a shift from real estate kind of investment to other kinds of investments, which are of course considered less riskier.
Yes.
Because real estate takes time. We did to real estate last year. So I think those two things will be evident when this bill passes. And as I have mentioned, there's a high likelihood that it will pass, given the reasons that I have mentioned.
Pretty much. EFFIE, clear for us this conversation this morning then. And I would like to finally ask your position on this specific bill, which we do expect is likely to pass. But then I ask you again, EFFIE, I mean, the real estate sector is one that has been sort of recovering for quite a long time now. And then all of a sudden, this bill, bam, on top of his head. What do we expect to happen again in the real estate sector?
What I will say will typically happen,
yes,
is people will shy away from investing in real estate. It's been
for some time, isn't it?
Pardon?
For some time, not in the immediacy.
Okay. For some time, what will happen? That's what I'm trying to say. People will shy away from investing in real estate. Yeah, even in future, we'll see a situation whereby you don't want to enter into a market where you don't have the ability to control prices.
Yes.
So I'm sure this regulation is going to hurt a lot of real estate investors in various ways. I'm expecting also the performance of all other real estate investment trusts will go down. So it's not something that a real estate investor would take in lightly.
Pretty much. At this point, I'd like to say thank you very much to you, EFFIE and Anthony, for joining us this morning for this conversation. We take a short break, but we still come back with George for the rest of our economic review this morning. Thank you very much again to you, Anthony and EFFIE.